According to some of the witnesses, there was a close encounter of the third kind.
In December 1980, multiple reports described strange lights near Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England.
The incident starts with strange lights being seen in the forest.
Often referred to as Britain's Roswell, this incident remains the most well-known UFO sighting in the UK.
The event took place on the night of the 28th and the early morning of the 29th of December.
Rendlesham Forest spans about 15 square kilometres of woodland in Suffolk, located roughly 13 kilometres east of Ipswich. Today, the forest is managed by Forestry England and is open to the public, offering facilities for walkers, cyclists, and campers. While the area is relatively remote, its main draw is the natural beauty of the landscape. Close to the forest is RAF Woodbridge, a former Royal Air Force base built in 1943 during World War II. Its original purpose was to assist damaged aircraft returning from missions over Germany. During the Cold War, the base was used by the United States Air Force. In early 1952, the Air Ministry made the station available to the U.S., and it was upgraded to meet NATO standards. RAF Woodbridge became home to the 79th and 78th Tactical Fighter Squadrons, as well as units of the 81st Fighter Wing. Nearby RAF Bentwaters operated alongside it, and the two became known as the Twin Bases. Both bases remained in use until their closure in 1993. The bases have sparked theories about their true purpose, with some suggesting the U.S. stored nuclear missiles there without the knowledge of the UK population. However, what truly brought attention to the area were the events of December 1980.
Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. Looks beyond maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out. Still getting a reading on the meter, about 2 clicks.
In the early hours of December 26, 1980, lights were seen by a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge. The lights appeared to descend into Rendlesham Forest. Because of their proximity to the base, the patrol, consisting of Jim Penniston, John Burroughs, and Ed Cabansag, initially assumed they were dealing with a crashed aircraft. After receiving permission from the on-duty flight chief, they headed toward the lights. Once inside the forest, they encountered a glowing object. According to reports, the object was metallic and triangular, measuring around 2 to 3 meters across its base and about 2 meters high. It emitted an intense white light that illuminated the surrounding area and featured a pulsing red light on top, with blue lights underneath. Penniston and Burroughs ventured into the forest to investigate the mysterious craft, while Cabansag stayed near the truck to act as a radio relay. Despite staying back, Cabansag could still see the pulsing lights coming from whatever was in the forest. As Penniston and Burroughs moved closer, they began to experience unusual sensations on their hair, skin, and clothing. Penniston would later state that he encountered a craft of unknown origin during their time in the woods that night. He claimed to have examined the craft for about 45 minutes, even touching its smooth surface. He also described hieroglyphic-like inscriptions engraved on the side of the craft, which he said felt rough, like sandpaper. At some point, the object or light moved, causing animals on a nearby farm to go into a frenzy. The noise from the animals, combined with the strange lights, led someone to contact the police, who arrived at the scene around 4 a.m. However, by the time they arrived, the only lights they observed came from the nearby lighthouse. Once daylight broke on the morning of December 26th, servicemen returned to the forest to investigate further. Near the eastern edge of the forest, they discovered a small clearing with 3 indentations on the ground. They also noticed broken branches and burn marks on nearby trees. The police were called again later that morning, around 10:30 a.m., and were shown the impressions on the ground. However, the officers dismissed them as being made by an animal. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander, decided to take matters into his own hands. In the early hours of December 28, 1980, though he later reported it as December 29th, Halt and several servicemen ventured into the forest, equipped with cameras and Geiger counters. Using a standard U.S. military radiation survey meter, they recorded radiation levels at the site, with the highest readings in the triangular depressions and near the center of the formation. During their investigation, the group also spotted a flashing light to the east, almost aligned with a farmhouse across the field. The same farmhouse where the animals had gone into a frenzy the previous night remained in view. From the same spot, they could also see the lighthouse further east. In addition, 3 star-like lights appeared in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south, just above the horizon. The brightest of these lights hovered for about 2 to 3 hours and occasionally emitted a beam of light down toward the ground. The Halt tape is an audio recording that Colonel Halt made during the second sighting in the early hours of December 28, 1980. The tape captures the investigation in the forest as it happened. 2 weeks later, Colonel Halt wrote a memo addressed to the Ministry of Defense. While the memo contains some inaccuracies, such as reporting the first sighting as occurring on December 27th instead of the actual date of December 26th, this could be due to the fact that Halt didn't write it until 2 weeks after the events, potentially leading to some confusion about the dates. At the time, the general public was unaware of what had occurred in December 1980, apart from a few rumors and witnesses wondering what they had seen. Halt's memo wasn't made public until 3 years later, when it was declassified under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. Once released, the story quickly gained international attention, sparking widespread media coverage and becoming a global sensation. It became the focus of speculation, misinformation, and conspiracy theories. The most prominent theory was that the events were extraterrestrial in nature and had been covered up by both the UK and US governments. Colonel Halt has since publicly stated that he believes he witnessed an alien encounter that was later concealed. Now, let's return to the group of men who claimed to see the craft in the woods. One of the most famous aspects of this case is Jim Penniston's notebook of binary code. Penniston described the craft as non-aerodynamic, triangular, and black, with patterns of blue, yellow, and red colors flowing across its glassy surface as though they were part of the craft itself. He claimed he got close enough to touch the craft and, when he did, was overwhelmed by a brilliant white light that blocked out all sight and sound. He doesn't know how much time passed between touching the craft and being engulfed in the bright light to finding himself standing next to it again. It could have been minutes, maybe just seconds. He has no idea. When he regained his senses, the craft began glowing a bright white. The light was so intense that Penniston started worrying it might explode. Acting quickly, he moved to a safer distance. Moments later, the craft descended, but Penniston's experience didn't end there. The next day, he began seeing sequences of ones and zeros flashing in his mind repeatedly. It became so overwhelming that he felt compelled to write them down. He filled 16 pages in his notebook before the images finally disappeared. At the time, Penniston had no knowledge of binary code and dismissed the sequences as meaningless scribbles. He put the notebook away and didn't think about it again for years. It wasn't until 2010, during a conversation with a researcher, that he mentioned the notebook. The researcher immediately recognized the possibility that the sequences might be binary code and offered to help decode them. This led to binary code expert and researcher Joe Luciano examining the writings. Meanwhile, David Clark, a consultant for the National Archives, began investigating the background of the case and the Ministry of Defense's response. Through interviews with personnel connected to the incident, Clark confirmed that the ministry's investigation was only cursory. Interestingly, he couldn't find any evidence of additional official reports beyond the basic inquiry conducted by the Ministry and Halt's own documentation. When the Ministry of Defense's file on the case was made public in 2001, it mostly consisted of internal correspondence and responses to public inquiries about the incident. There was a noticeable lack of a thorough investigation, which gives the impression that the case was never taken seriously. British Government Defence Minister Lord David Trefgarne addressed this in his memo to the Ministry of Defence. In it, he pointed out that Colonel Halt did not recommend a further investigation. Trefgarne also noted that the delay in Halt writing the memo, 2 weeks after the incident, conveyed the sense that the case wasn't considered very important. In 1997, Scottish researcher James Easton obtained the original witness statements from those involved on the first night of the sightings. Ed Cabansag, who was present that night, stated in his report that the lights appeared to come from beyond the forest. After reaching a vantage point, they concluded that the light was simply a beacon in the distance. Another witness, John Burroughs, mentioned in his original statement that they followed the light for about 2 miles before determining that it was coming from a lighthouse. Burroughs also recalled hearing sounds that resembled a woman screaming, along with loud noises from farm animals. Colonel Halt would later report hearing similar sounds 2 nights afterward. Some have suggested these noises were likely made by muntjac deer in the forest. However, in later interviews, Burroughs claimed he saw an object in the forest that night. Another account came from a forestry worker named Vince Thurkettle. Thurkettle said he was chopping wood in Rendlesham Forest when a car pulled up. 2 men in black suits stepped out and began asking him questions about unusual lights in the forest the night before. Confused, Thurkettle assumed they were journalists and answered as best he could, though he hadn't seen anything strange. The men thanked him and left quickly. When no news about the incident appeared in the papers, though he had heard rumors of strange lights and a possible UFO sighting, Thurkettle asked his boss to show him where it had happened. When he visited the site, Thurkettle found nothing out of the ordinary. He described a regular forest clearing with 3 carefully marked rabbit scrapes arranged in a rough triangle. Thurkettle claimed that the broken trees in the forest were nothing out of the ordinary. The burn marks, according to him, were simply caused by another ranger, Bill Briggs, who had been using an axe. While Thurkettle didn't pay much attention to the men in suits, others certainly did. These figures have often been linked to Rendlesham Forest. For example, UFO investigator Brenda Butler has spent many years researching this case. She reportedly visited the forest weekly in hopes of uncovering evidence. In 1984, Butler and 2 co-authors published a book called Sky Crash, which questioned why UK authorities tried to suppress what had occurred in the forest. Another story involving the so-called Men in Black came from Larry Warren. Warren had been sent into the forest to investigate reports of strange lights. On the 3rd night, he claimed to have seen his superiors, Colonel Halt and Colonel Williams, standing near a bright, unidentified craft. On 29 December 1980, Warren received a phone call. The caller didn't give their name, simply instructing him to be at the parking lot in 20 minutes or else. Warren hurried to the meeting spot. He was then approached by 2 men dressed in dark suits who motioned for him to get into a dark blue sedan. He soon found himself in a semi-conscious state and taken to what seemed to be an underground facility. He assumed it was beneath the base, but couldn't confirm for sure. Warren later wrote a book titled Left at Eastgate, where he detailed his experiences from that night in 1980. As with many cases involving strange phenomena, there are believers and skeptics. And for an incident as well known as the Rendlesham Forest event, opinions are abundant. To keep things balanced, I'll present both sides of this story. The first explanation proposed is the simplest. It was all a hoax. In 2003, the BBC reported that Kevin Conde, a former U.S. security policeman, claimed responsibility for the incident. He said he used patrol car lights to shine through the trees and made noises over the loudspeaker as a prank. According to Conde, such practical jokes were common among the security police. He explained that he had driven through the forest, flashing lights into the fog, just to pull a prank. While it's possible that Conde did play such a prank, there's no proof that he did so on the specific nights in question. All we have is his claim. It's entirely possible he played this prank on a different occasion. Another theory suggests the incident was caused by a downed Soviet spy satellite. However, there is no evidence to support this idea either. The most widely accepted explanation points to three main factors. A bright fireball was reportedly seen over southern England the night the airmen witnessed something descending into the forest. The marks on the ground were attributed to rabbits digging in the area. And the flashing lights? They were from a lighthouse nearby. Some have speculated that the star-like objects Colonel Halt reported hovering low to the north and south were likely bright stars distorted by atmospheric and optical effects. However, despite official explanations and skeptics offering their own theories, the Rendlesham Forest incident remains one of the most well-known and thoroughly documented UFO sightings in history. While skeptics dismiss it, many still believe that something unusual happened in that forest. They also acknowledge that the true nature of the object may never be fully understood. Official investigations by both the British and U.S. governments have failed to provide conclusive evidence of extraterrestrial activity or completely rule it out, fueling ongoing speculation about a potential cover-up. The Rendlesham Forest case is fascinating due to the sheer amount of information available. Many have shared their thoughts, personal experiences, or outright dismissed the incident as fake, providing their reasons. In discussing this case, I've focused on the accounts of two key figures, Colonel Halt and Jim Penniston. Regardless of whether you believe the story, both men have consistently maintained that something strange occurred in that forest. They've held firm in their claims, even after facing years of ridicule. In fact, many individuals connected to the case seem to have accepted that the Rendlesham Forest incident may remain an unsolved mystery. Yet, this mystery only adds to its allure, keeping what's often called Britain's Roswell a subject of ongoing debate and interest among UFO researchers and enthusiasts. Now let's discuss another similar and intriguing UFO incident. On the evening of October 11, 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing near Pascagoula, Mississippi, when they experienced an unsettling event. They reported hearing a whirring sound followed by flashing blue lights, and saw a large, oval-shaped object hovering above them. The object was around 30 to 40 feet wide and 8 to 10 feet tall. The two men claimed to be conscious but paralyzed, as three strange beings with robotic features and crab-like pincers took them aboard the object. The creatures allegedly examined Hickson and Parker before releasing them back to the riverbank. The men quickly reported the incident to the local sheriff's office, and their story drew significant media attention. Hickson later appeared on television and even wrote a book about the experience, while Parker attended UFO conventions and later authored his own account in 2018. The Pascagoula abduction became one of the most talked-about UFO encounters, though it has been met with skepticism. Critics pointed out inconsistencies in Hickson's story and questioned his behavior. Some believed Hickson's experience could have been a waking dream, or that Parker was influenced by suggestibility, given his initial claim of losing consciousness during the incident. Despite the skepticism, a historical marker was placed at the site of the alleged abduction in 2019, with Parker in attendance. The event left a lasting impact on both men's lives, and Parker continued to speak about it until his death in 2023. More recently, a UFO sighting has caught the attention of many, as witnesses reported seeing a mysterious craft in the sky. Described as a sleek, dark-colored object with a distinct blue glow, the craft had a futuristic, disc-like shape, but with sharper, more angular edges. It seemed to hover or move slowly, with light shining from both its center and along its edges. The blue lights surrounding the object stood out, casting an eerie glow over the area. Witnesses watched it for a few moments before it suddenly disappeared without a trace. While some thought it could have been a military or experimental aircraft, the strange design and lighting made many wonder if it could be something more, maybe even extraterrestrial. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed watching this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more.